Good morning, Leslie Graham Andrews, and welcome to Trailblazers Impact. And I purposely use your full government name, as the kids would say nowadays, as I reflect on the length of time that I've known you. On behalf of my co-hosts, Nan McKay and myself, I do thank you for your willingness to share your journey. As I prepared your introduction, it occurred to me that I have both literally and figuratively seen you grow up, having known you since you were 20-something, and now you are a fully evolved woman in her 50s who has hit her stride and has so much to share with our audience and so many others. You've had personal challenges and accomplishments that have defined your trajectory. You have a documented track record as a corporate executive, a fundraiser, a civic leader, an entrepreneur, a community activist, a public speaker, and a global citizen. But having known you as long as I have, I also know that your journey was not that proverbial straight line, that no obstacle is set that so many people assume they will have when they start out in their life trajectory. You suffered personal losses along the way, including becoming widowed at a very young age. You have faced down financial challenges a time or two, like most Americans have. And most recently, you vacated your business enterprises to remain home to become the full-time caregiver for your mom after critically evaluating the nature of the care that could or could not be safely provided in a nursing home facility during this pandemic. Yet, you've shared with me that once again, you will collect yourself physically, emotionally, spiritually, and again, just like a phoenix, you will rise. And I will always bet on you to do exactly what you say you will do. I'd like to start by asking you to share with our listeners a little bit about your childhood and what you believe to be the childhood influences and influencers that made way for your purpose-driven life, your stamina, your resolve to pick yourself up whenever life knocked you down, and how these influences have made way for your advocacy as an executive with the United Negro College Fund, with Quicken Loans, the establishment of your own businesses, and all the while becoming a steadfast and major contributor to the resurrection of your beloved hometown, Detroit, Michigan. And with all of this background, I know that it helped to inform your personal philosophy on Black Lives Matter. So, after having such highly successful tenures, such as that of Director of Community Relations for Quicken Loans and the Rock family of companies, I'd like for you to share your story.
Well, thank you, of course, for having me today. This is truly an honor when you get to spend time with one of your role models and mentors, as you are for me. And I appreciate the opportunity. It's interesting. In preparing for this, I had to really give a little bit of thought about, what I was going to actually speak upon. And I can tell you that is no truer statement in my life, which is you can be what you see. And what I saw coming up was a deep and unapologetic sense of community. My mom had me, and she was an only child. I was an only child. My grandmother was an only child. But we had extended community families. I have so many extended families, so many, as I call them, play cousins. But the reality was back then, I'm born in 67. I'm a 60s, 70s baby. There was a collective sense of community that everybody helped each other. Everyone made sure that everyone else in their families and in their communities had what they needed. So I spent a lot of time being babysat by a lot of different families, and it actually helped make me and shape me into the woman I am today, because I understood quite clearly that loyalty and an ownership of someone else's outcomes is one of the highest forms of any type of, how can I put it? Any type of honor that you could bestow upon someone is to make their collective outcomes personal to you. And that's what a lot of individuals did for my mother and I as she made it through nursing school. And that wasn't just family. Her professors allowed her to bring me to class with her so she could finish school. I mean, there were a lot of individuals who invested in our story to get me to where I am today. The other thing that I can be, because I saw it, is that I never saw anyone quit. I never learned how to quit. I don't even know what quitting looks like. I never heard anyone, and I'm sure my mother wanted to quit many a day. I'm sure she quit when she went to bed. And by the time she woke up, she was back committed again to whatever the journey was at that moment. But I never saw anyone quit. And I only saw different levels of courage. Some of those levels of courage was a matter of just being silent in the face of real deep trials and tribulations. And then some of them were speaking truth to power and not worrying about the consequence, which was more of my grandmother. Is she told you exactly where she was and what she was thinking, and she left it up to you to deal with how you were going to process it, because that wasn't her business. And I took that in. I take that in, and I took it with me into corporate America. I took it in with me when I went to go and meet with families in the communities. I take it with me in every boardroom where I volunteer. I take that sense of community, that sense of courage, and that undying need to, I never quit. Those things go with me every place I've gone, and they've served me over and over again. Honestly, they served me even in serious situations where I did not think I'd find myself, like being a widow at 43. And, and having to negotiate an exit when I'm leaving corporate America, when I'm thinking my work's not quite done, but they believe otherwise, and having to regroup and gather myself and figure out what was next very quickly, as a matter of fact. How to lick your wounds in private, but to show up publicly strong. Those are the types of things that I learned in my childhood. And I learned that Detroit raised me, period. Detroit is the center of, I don't want to say scrappiness, but we are the grit of America. There's no question. There's no quit in Detroit. There is a find a way, make a way, manufacture a way in Detroit. There is a never say die type of spirit. We're all in this together. We may agree to disagree, but at the end of the day, if you're a Detroiter, I cross the line to stand over next to you as opposed to staying opposed to you. All of our outcomes are interdependent upon our ability to be loyal to that sense of Detroit and our native love. And that's what I have. And that's what I give back to. And that's really a relationship, a covenant that you continue to honor and fill every single day in every piece of work that I do. So those are really the main things. My family, my extended family, but also my family, my extended family within the boundaries and in the rich environment and the soil of Detroit. And that will always flow through my blood. There's no question about it.
So tell me, I know that in the past you had shared with me, but I can't recall. How was it that you left Michigan to go to Georgia, to go to Spelman? And tell us a little bit about Spelman College and at what point you set your sights on attending Spelman.
Well, intellect has always been sort of a DNA family trait. So we come from just a smart family. But I really didn't want to go to Spelman. The two smartest decisions that my mother made for me was to send me to the Cass Technical High School, which is one of the few high schools in this country where people still know of us, even though we are truly just a high school in Detroit, but a top high school in Detroit. And then also to Spelman College. And my mother said one thing to me one day. She said, I don't care where you go, but if I'm paying for it, you're going to an HBCU. And I had to run and go look up HBCU because I was dead set on Michigan State University with my friends, because the last vestige of childhood that I had to shed was my need to want to be in the pack. And my mother always told me that I didn't need to be in the pack, that I was the leader of the pack. I just had to figure that out and decide to do it. So at 17 years old, when I got accepted to Spelman, early admission, as a matter of fact, because I really just, the academic part was never in question. My mother said, okay, you're going to Spelman. And she paid the fee before I could change my mind. And she dropped me off at Spelman's gates at 17. And I have to say this, my mother really truly understood her child. She knew exactly what she could and could not do where I was concerned. And I think every mother knows their child, but my mother knew to set me out there in such a way that I had to figure it out and I had to work it out. But she knew that I would always accomplish whatever goal I set in front of me. So for me going to Spelman, I didn't want to be there. I wanted to be at home. I loved my environment. I loved some Detroit. But the one thing I can honestly say is Spelman both saved and changed my life. It saved.
Well, before you go on, I just want to say for the record, would you define what an HBCU is for the listening audience, and then the significance of Spelman in the context of an HBCU?
Absolutely. So HBCUs are historically Black colleges and universities, pretty much founded and or began to be accumulated as a federal designation after the Civil War, 1865. So Spelman is unique in the sense that it is one of two single gender female HBCUs. We are, us and Bennett are the only two HBCUs that primarily and only serve African American women, but you are able to matriculate to some of our classes. That's why we say primarily. We do have some students who come and take classes who are male, but yeah, we serve primarily African American females. And the reason I can say that Spelman both changed and saved my life is because, number one, Spelman was the first place where I saw a female PhD. So I really understood, even though as smart as I was, it's just some things you just have to actually experience to understand. So when I saw the letters doctor, I assumed medical or dental or something to that effect. When I got to Spelman, all of my professors, my first 2 years, were doctors. So that was like, okay, so the PhD is something extraordinarily interesting to be, because these women were very interesting and impactful to me. The way that I say that it saved and changed my life as well is that it put me in the company of other young women who were just like me. They were as smart as me or smarter. Okay. They came from similar backgrounds as I did. We all came to get the same thing. We came from different places, and we arrived at that point at such a time as this to make our mark on a campus. We were unclear, but we were definitely willing. It was a finishing school of life. We modeled a lot of things. We learned a lot of things. We failed at a lot of things. I had my very first attempt at social justice at Spelman my senior year, as I was a part of a group that stormed the president's office to demand that we have a female president be a candidate and be heard, and that students got to hear from her directly, who is now known as Dr. Janetta Cole. And I received my bachelor's degree. I was in her first graduating class. And to which my mother said, look, you can be all the activist you want, but don't get kicked out of school in your senior year. But it actually whet my appetite for the importance of what a collaborative group with a passionate position about something can actually bring about that change. And we were ready to lock down the entire building. It was quite an exciting experience just to reflect upon it right now. But yeah, that was the Spelman experience purely, as we say, it's Black girl magic. I say it's Black woman excellence. And we really, truly continue to elevate the role and set the bar. It is never going to obviously be firmly set. It's going to continue to be elevated with every single class that follows us.
Well, your love and high regard and respect for Spelman as an HBCU, or a member of the HBCU family of colleges and universities across the country, certainly comes through in this interview. And I guess then that probably speaks to why your trajectory landed you at the United Negro College Fund. Can you share a little bit about UNCF and how you got to UNCF, your role with United Negro College Fund? And of course, I'm sure every listener in the audience remembers the days when the commercial would come up saying, mind is a terrible thing to waste, the UNCF mantra. And if you talk a little bit about that as well.
Well, that's actually a very interesting story. I ran out of money my sophomore year. Mom said, by that point I had an apartment, I had a life. She said, you're 18, you're grown. You'll either come home or you'll work it out, you'll figure it out. She was on a nurse's salary. There was only but so much she could do. And ultimately, I made it all the way up to my second semester senior year, and I had exhausted, at that time, loan had limits. I had exhausted my loan limits, and I was, for the first time in 4 years, sitting outside the financial aid office because no one had told me to go and apply for a scholarship. Again, be what you see. In my world, you went and got a job, and if you needed some more money, you went and got another job. So I worked 2 jobs while I was still trying to graduate from Spelman. And the clear sacrifice was I didn't have the collegiate entertainment life, but I couldn't afford a 5th year. So I had to sacrifice all the fun, and I needed to finish what I started in 4 years. And I was sitting outside the financial aid office, and the director at the time came by, and I was sitting there crying. I was crying because I was tired. I was crying because I was hungry, and it was lunchtime. But I was also crying because I was just at my wit's end. And she brought me in the office, and I was $3,300 short. And I told her my story. She said, go on to class and come back and see me tomorrow. I went back to see her the next day, and I had a paid in full bill. And this is God's truth. And what they had done is they had taken some unrestricted funds that they had gotten from UNCF, and she paid my bill because they prioritized seniors. And although my GPA was a paltry 2.5 whatever, at that point, she just stepped out on faith. Again, another sense of community of somebody who invested in me in that moment, that one-time moment that has been pivotal to the rest of my life. And so I never really paid attention. I got the money from UNCF. I saw it on the bill, but I never really paid attention to it. Fast forward to 2004, I was coming off of a 10-year sales career where I was doing extremely well. I was selling media, and I had done $1 million five different years. I was doing very, very well in the 90s, but I was bored. And this is where I was introduced to my sense of philanthropy and my sense of community again, where I wanted to do something that made a difference. I was making money, got very old very quick. And someone sent me an email, which was afforded of an email for an assistant director's position at UNCF. And long story short, I applied for it. They almost didn't hire me because the previous year I had made $92,000. And they said, you do understand this is a $38,000 pay cut. And I said, I do, but I'm not married. I don't have any children, and I can't keep doing this job anymore because it doesn't feed my spirit. I remember that conversation. And I started out as the assistant director in 2004. I ascended to the state director in 2007. And it allowed me to sow back into the lives of young people that which was sown into me that day I was sitting outside of the financial aid office. And it's such a wonderful feeling when life works full circle, because we don't get full circle moments all the time. And when I got that full circle moment, I held on to it and I cherished it. And it was a very deep learning experience about business, about people, about money, about what true currency is. Relationship is the highest form of currency. Money itself are just financial tools and instruments. And I learned the difference between getting people to buy into whatever it is that you're trying to convince them has value, the power of storytelling, the value of being a good storyteller, and how you actually help people do the very thing that they want to do, which is to impact the lives of others by, building that trust that you can be the vehicle by which they can enjoy that experience. And it was a recession during that time on top of everything else. So I really did learn how to speak in a language that people understood, and it calmed them and it gave them a sense of confidence to stay the course as opposed to bailing. And like I said, I never learned how to quit. So it never dawned on me not to ask. It really was imbued upon me to change the story to fit the moment. And
when you say fit the story to fit the moment, I'm going to go back to that in just a second, but I want to interject just something that just washed over me. Is when I looked up Black Lives Matter to see how it was being described in Wikipedia and online and various dictionaries and that type of thing, it talked about it being a movement that started with the hashtag after Trayvon Martin was shot and killed, and then George Zimmerman was determined to be innocent, so to speak. But what you just said, when I said just washed over me, that UNCF really was the first public face of Black Lives Matter. Mm-hmm. That their mission to ensure the education and equal access to opportunities by people as yourselves that went out and asked donors for money big money, corporate donors, individuals, to invest in Black youth that were trying to go to college and trying to make it through college. As you said, you were there all the way into your senior year. You were working 2 jobs, done everything you could, and then you were coming up short. And UNCF saved you, even though you didn't even understand what a UNCF is. So I want to go back to the statement that you just made and ask you to further expound on the donor side and the storytelling, the narrative. What was the narrative that you were sharing that moved corporations like General Motors and Chrysler and churches and individuals to give money to the United Negro College Fund so you could continue to award financial assistance to young Black students?
I told my story. That was the beauty of the moment. Back then in 1988, I had no idea that what I was experiencing at that moment would be the very story that I would need to fast forward to in 2004, that I could modify it for audience purposes, but the story itself, I remain true to it, which was that if we have a sense of community, we all need to help each other. I was that child, and I could speak on that with conviction, very clearly and honestly and thoroughly, that I did everything I was supposed to do, but I still needed some help across the finish line. Have you ever needed help across the finish line? And if you've ever needed help across the finish line, then you can relate to what these young people are doing down on these campuses, young people that you will never meet, but you're meeting me. And I can promise you that I am a very accurate and passionate representation of these young people who need the very thing that I needed X amount of years prior.
As a fundraiser, how much in the aggregate roughly did you raise over, and how many years were you with UNCF as a fundraiser in the state of Michigan for the investment in these young Black lives?
I was there just under 9 years, and our annual goal was 3.9 million every year. It's very interesting because there was so much more than money that was raised. What you're doing is you're building awareness, but you're building a stakeholder type relationship, because I never wanted it to depend on my presence in the office. The thing I'm most proud of right now is the woman who was my assistant at the time is now the director of the office, and we still talk. And I still, try to give her a little bit of this, or she don't really need me anymore, honestly. But even if it's just encouragement, because I've been where she is. So I always try to give donors a sense of community and a sense of sowing a seed, but also not make it connected to just my story. It had to be on a broader term. So everybody understood that there's going to be some children coming behind these children and coming behind these children. And I'm gonna be very honest with you, sometimes I had to condition the story and tell it from a sense of, this is also helping us fulfill America's covenant to Black and brown people in this country. Because the reason the HBCUs even exist in the first place was because it was their answer, their response to the political condition at this time. So this has been out here for a long time, and it has achieved above and far beyond whatever its design was, but it has a new purpose. And I need everyone on the team to bring some resources to the table so we can fulfill that new and broader purpose. It was just conversations like that. But I always was find a way to connect that donor to the story.
Leslie, can you recall just two short examples of someone that you think of even now as you look in the rearview mirror, whose life you changed as a result of being able to raise this money to influence the lives of so many young Black people attempting to finish their college years, somebody who may have become stellar or again went on themselves to become a change agent as a result of that college degree that UNCF was able to fund. And then secondly, given the fact that Detroit is your home, and Detroit for so many years was in the news with regard to violence, disenfranchisement, marginalization of the Black population there. What is your reflection on the necessity and the importance of people becoming or continuing to be invested in the opportunities for young Black people?
The very first story that comes to mind, and this was really a weekly occurrence, is I would have mothers or parents, but mostly mothers, calling me crying because their child was already there at school and didn't have the money to either finish or didn't have the money to even come home, like finish their semester and bring their grades with them so they could transfer. And one of the things that I learned from my great aunt and my grandmother is always keep a couple of nickels in, and they say, keep them up here. Keep a couple of nickels close to your vest because you never know when you would need them. So whenever money was not used or returned, because we had some students who got more than they needed, I would always earmark it as, you know, something for the local office to utilize. And I remember quite clearly a mother calling me, and her daughter was $7,500 short. And we were right at the end of the fiscal year, and I needed to move this money. And I had her meet me at a coffee shop. Did not know her. But there was no way I was going to give somebody $7,500 that I did not know, even though I truly understood. I had looked up her daughter, and she was at Clark Atlanta University, which was one of our schools. And over 2 cups of coffee, I learned that she was homeless and sleeping on her mother's sofa. Her daughter did not know. And she was trying her best to keep things as normal as possible. Because when she returned home, she had planned on telling her. She was laid off from General Motors, and she was ashamed. Her friends didn't know, her church didn't know. I mean, we sat in that coffee shop for probably almost 3 hours. I know at least 2. And I made sure when I got back to the office that I transferred $7,500 to her daughter's account at Clark. And then when she called me the next time, she was in tears. But she said, you doing that gives me enough energy or enough spirit to get up and try again. And her daughter is now doing some work out in Los Angeles. She did graduate from Clark Atlanta University, very artistic, very smart woman. But the mother is doing her own podcast and how to overcome obstacles and all of the above. And she's a life coach, and she's all of these other things. And I just met the responsibility of that moment. Okay. And I keep saying that because that's just the words that continue to be impressed upon my spirit, is every moment has its own responsibility. And I was just humbled to be a part of that one. And the more that you're a change agent or you're a tool in somebody else's story or evolution, it is a humbling experience, but it just keeps reminding me that there's always hope. Always. I don't care how it looks, there's always hope. I don't quite remember the second question.
Well, and actually I'm going to modify it a little, so let me restate it. So because as you shared, another part came to me in terms of something you had shared with me recently, but in the context of the Black Lives Matter movement, and thinking again how we can look at the number of young people who were saved as a result of efforts like through the United Negro College Fund and your work personally there in the state of Michigan, and you're being a civic leader in Detroit. You said that you had visited Egypt this past year or earlier this year, and you were there as a speaker, and that you left with looking at Black Lives Matter through a whole different lens. So I'd like for you to speak again in the context of from the sort of the outside world looking in, and what did you leave Egypt with that was impressed upon you further about Black Lives Matter?
So I may turn this question upside down a little bit, so my apologies.
Okay. No problem. It's your story.
It's a very long flight, so and I'm quite analytical, so I'll be picking things apart on that very, very long flight. But the thing that impressed upon me the most when I was in Egypt and in context of Black Lives Matter is God has already spoken. All of us internally are exactly the same. He has just costumed us in different exteriors, probably more for our learning than for his glory in that sense. He's already decided, that he made all of us the same internally for a reason, just like we're different externally for a reason. So that revelation made me really begin to wonder, why do I have to give reason or, have this discussion or remind the world that Black Lives Matter? I need the world to show to me why they think that Black lives don't matter. Why is it okay for you to do what you do? Why is it acceptable for you to disregard the value of any life? You know, I really, the longer I keep hearing that phrase, it's not that I disagree with it. I just think it's so limited and small in scope. But it is, again, it's responding to a moment. But in the grander scheme of things, everybody's like, oh, all lives matter. Life matters. The discussion needs to evolve to a level of why you think it is okay to do some of the things that you have done to another human life. And why is it okay those who bear witness, who sit either at the television or in the street or behind the camera phone, why is it okay for you not to demonstrate the courage necessary to stand up for that life that you are witnessing being violated? And that goes back again to the very first thing I talked about, which is childhood and sense of community and a sense of loyalty and a sense of collective action. We are in this together. And it doesn't mean we Black people are in this together. It means we human beings are in this together. I am very saddened when I still look online, I do my social media and I look around and people are shocked by some of the things that are happening when they have been happening for as long as we have been here. I'm shocked that you're shocked.
Right.
You know, I don't, and then again, it's also about the difference of how we move through life. I take it very seriously every time I go out of the door because I do understand that there's nothing different between me and Sandra Bland. There is absolutely nothing different between me and Breonna Taylor. We've got to stop looking at the things that make us different, and we have to begin to strengthen the ties that bind and then act courageously for human life. Yes, Black life matters. I'm Black. Yes, I've helped Black folks. I've been raised by Black folks. I have invested and sown seeds in the Blackest city there is. There is nothing but like oil pumping through my veins when it comes to the depth of Blackness. But I cannot miss the opportunity to challenge the entire world to really explain why human life doesn't matter. Don't pigeonhole me over here just on the Black Lives Matter side. That's a great place to start, and there's plenty to unpack, and there's a wealth of work that needs to be done. But we also need to remember who's our real audience. And our audience are those people who are still stunned that Black people are dying on the street. And the only difference between now and when I was a child is technology and a camera phone. So we're not shocked, but we know the responsibility of this moment, and we just elevated and responded to it through technology with hashtags and all of these other things. But we always revert back to the basics, which is the protest, the march, the speaking out, the sacrifice, the being the courageous leader, the movement to the front. And guess what? Once again, Black women are the ones who are either elevating the conversation, lifting the platform, or demanding the microphone.
You know, and I want to circle back to the intersection between your activism, your passion, your consciousness and awareness around the pain as well as the progress that has been made in the Black community through efforts such as the United Negro College Fund. And as you were talking, I was trying to remember during the years, and I know that you lost the love of your life, your husband. He was young, you were young, and he struggled and suffered with some form of cancer, and you became widowed. But again, your fortitude, your stamina, your faith got you back up on your feet. Were you at UNCF during those years, or had you transitioned into your next career path?
No, I was at UNCF.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking that, you know, that all that you were doing to help others and the passion that you brought to that mission, you were on the home front, taking care of an ill husband. Mm-hmm. And again, what do you see as I want to say the intersection between your ability to keep up the good fight for others at the same time you were keeping up the good fight at home, you know, with your husband's illness?
Well, I actually did donor calls from his ICU room.
Oh.
I don't say that in a braggadocious kind of way. I just say that and again, I keep going back to the beginning. I never saw anyone quit. I never saw the women in my life complain. I never saw them quit. If they had some things going on, I never knew about it. So I didn't learn how to quit. Now, there was some things I did way too much of that that were unfair to me physically and emotionally. But I learned sacrifice at such an early age that I didn't learn how to qualify sacrifice and only do but so much. You push all your chips in. The same way I pushed all the chips in with my husband is the same way I pushed all my chips in on my mother, on my grandmother. I continue to mirror and mimic what I was taught. And I push all the chips in when it comes to the board work and the community work I do in Detroit. It's all the same for me. It literally is all the same for me. I really do believe in my soul. To whom much is given, much is required. I am indomitably blessed beyond reach and favor and explanation. So I just show up with that blessing mentality. And that's what I've always done. And that is the intersection. I never saw women who quit. I am literally mimicking the behavior. I'm following the blueprint that I inherited. And if that makes me, you know, extraordinary, or if that makes me just another, you know, strong Black woman, whatever it makes me, I'm going to show up consistently in that ilk the rest of my life. I'm 53 now, so I'm not even about to start changing. So even when I didn't understand if what I was doing was the right thing, I courageously moved towards that because I was never afraid of whatever the wrong thing was. And I'm even less afraid now.
As I sort of characterize what you just shared, I'm reminded again of one of the sayings that I hear from younger people, which is, well, you only know what you know.
Yeah.
And that's what you just spoke to, is that you only know what you know. And you knew one thing, which was to just pick yourself up and keep moving forward. You also spoke to one of my favorite quotes, so to speak, is that I've been quoted by many people and in other interviews as saying repeatedly that Black women are the ones that hold the moral high ground in America, that we continually have staked out the moral high ground. And you referenced that as you were sharing your journey this morning. And I would say that I would appreciate your sharing sort of a perspective that you hold on what that means to you and I when we talk about Black women and the moral high ground.
Well, I look at it two ways. I look at the assignment God has put on my life, and then I look at the requirements that I need to operate and function here on earth. And the responsibility that I believe that God has put on my life is to encourage and sow seeds into the lives of others, and to speak truth to power, and be honest, and be an honest broker in my dealings, and how I feel, and be true, and be a leader in my community. I believe that. The requirements of Black women here on earth, I believe that that's what we were called to do. It is the requirement that we have staked out and identified, and we keep teaching each other generation over generation as literally the ante that is required to be in the game. And I think the beauty of Black women is that even now, when you look at all of the political pundits and all the conversations that they're having about how Black women delivered this and how Black women will deliver that, they know our value. They know our power. The question is, do we understand it? And what are we doing to stoke it, to grow it, to expand it? How courageous are we going to continue to be? Are we Ida B. Wells courageous? You know, who are we Harriet Tubman courageous? I mean, we have the blueprint, we have the role models, and we show up, we answer the call. And just by the presence of 2 or 3 of us, then 5 or 6 more of us will gravitate and answer the call. We share a journey that has common roots, even though it may come from different paths. And that makes all the difference in the world to me. And I don't have a problem being one of the ones to go to the front of the line and say, this is the way that we should go. And no matter what we encounter, if you're with me and I'm with you, we will be successful. Like, we move. Black women move in a direction. And we move in such a way that we empower others just to follow us, or at least to sit in awe of us. I don't care what you do, just don't get in our way.
And bringing this interview to a close, and it's like I could just talk with you for hours, as we have done on many occasions over the years. But I'm captivated by a phrase that you just used, which is to stoke it, to grow it, to advance it. What's next for Leslie? For Leslie Graham Andrews? How are you going to stoke it, grow it, and advance it?
Right now, I'm being still.
Okay.
I'm being still, and I'm observing. I'm healing. I'm learning life without my mother, who was my soulmate on so many different levels, and she was my moral compass. So I've got to strengthen my own moral compass now, and reflect on her teachings and figure out what the path is. But I promise you this, whatever it is going to require an extraordinary amount of courage and conviction and commitment. Because as I don't feel old. Kids talk about it. I'm 53. I promise you I don't feel older than 35. But I do recognize that the calendar and the clock put me on a trajectory where, if I'm going to be doing some things that I really, really am passionate about and improve the lives of women and girls and the Black community, I got to get with it. But I want to choose the right thing. I want to choose the thing that speaks deeply to who I am and where I'm going. And I do believe that with the outcome of this political election, that's going to impact some of the decisions that I make. I've already made some decisions about my commitments. I love this city, period. The question is, how am I going to show up in the future of Detroit in such a way that all Detroiters benefit? So I'm looking politically, I'm looking personally, I'm looking socially, I'm looking educationally. I'm interested in a PhD in anthropology, organizational anthropology, why people make the choices that they do, and what are the outcomes and the effects of those choices. I'm looking at a lot of things, but the main thing that I'm going to be is I'm going to be true to myself, and I'm just going to be responsible to every moment. Every moment. That's the best that I can do, and that is more than enough.
And it is more than enough, because you will always show up and you will show out no matter what it is that you decide to do. Thank you so much for sharing your journey, your perspectives, for making yourself vulnerable and talking about the good, the bad, the indifferent, the ugly, and I look forward to an interview with you in the future, maybe late next year. I'd like to revisit your perspectives on, again, what has happened as the result of whatever happens with the Black Lives Movement, if it's still ongoing, if it's evolved, if you've seen people evolve in a different way, meaning people of all races, as a result of the conversation. So thank you again on behalf of my co-host, Nan McKay, and myself, and know that we wish you nothing but blessings and prosperity, and the stamina and strength to keep on keeping on behalf of your community.
Well, thank you. And a year from now is a date, or any time in between, because the way this world is evolving at such a breakneck pace, there's probably a lot more that's going to be worth talking about between now and a year from now. But I'll keep an open spot for you.
Thank you.